This particular session is about a program called Fair Rent, and we don't get any credit for coming up with it. If you take a look at the lower right-hand corner of your handout, you'll see the address for it. It's www.fairrent.umn.edu. If you just Google Fair Rent, it will take you to the University of Minnesota site. The first thing that comes up under Firefox is Fair Rent. And you click on that and you'll get a screen like this, only the screen will ask you to input your name and a password. There's no charge, there's no gimmick, you don't get called on for sales or to buy something or sell something or anything like that. But all you do is input it, and then anytime you come back, you'll get this screen, welcome back. And I put in my name here, and I put in my password already, so we'll sign in. I'll show you, if you go to start a new plan, what type of plan would you like? You can, I don't know if you can read all these from the back. You can have a simple cash rent plan, and I'll show you, we'll walk through this one. You can do a share rent. You can do a flex on percent of gross. And I've got an example up here where we're going to flex, but we're going to have a minimum and a maximum inside the flex. Maybe that the landlord would buy. You can do a base rent plus a bonus on yield. You can do base rent plus a bonus on price. Base rent plus the bonus on yield and price. Flex on the yield, flex on the price, flex on the yield and price ratio. All kinds of, I would look at the first three. And that's what we're going to try to do here in the next 25 minutes. Okay? But you select the kind of plan you want and it'll set it up for you and you start filling in numbers. Okay, and we've got one set up in here called cash rent, so we're going to pull this one up. These are the crop inputs. And they're pretty simple. They're almost identical to that sheet that you have in front of you from the last session, if you were in here. You put in barley, corn, soybeans, and hard wheat. I put in 250 acres of each, 1,000-acre farm, so we can take a look at this. And we put in prices of $5, $3.50, $9.30, and $6. Identical to what we just looked at. And then we use those same inputs. Okay? So I'm not going to take you through how to type these in. The only thing I notice is when you type these in, it seems like you type them in, then you arrow or click on the arrow or however it is, and then it locks it, and then you go to the next one. So if you pull this up and want to use it, it's just a matter of how you're entering the number here, in case it gives you a little bit of frustration at first. But we just plug all of this information in. And this is pretty straightforward. And then once we've plugged all of that in, we go to calculate. There's a wealth of information on this thing. First of all, it comes back and it lists everything that we inputted so that you can look at it in case you got something that's a little wild. It, just like the last cash flow we looked at, has an unpaid operator labor and management line. If you want to put in $30 an acre because you're going to get paid or this, you're not going to do this, you can put that on this line here, or you can leave it blank. If you leave it blank, you come up with a raw break even, and then all of your different rents are going to be based off of that break even. I've run it both ways. I like the idea of having a $25 or $30 base in there for my labor. But yet, if you hand that to a landlord to work with, the first thing that pops out is, well, you're making $25. What are you griping about? Okay, so I take it back out, and let's see where we go. The break-even rent for all of these crops, $79.19. Okay, you follow that right on your sheet. To cover the direct expenses only, we would need $149 rent. If our yields would happen to be 15% higher, or yields and revenue, let's just say, not yields. If we had 15% more revenue, we would be at $204 return above direct costs. Okay, we got to pay the direct costs and the overhead, so let's go to this line. I'm at 79. Okay, that's what it told me right up here. I had $79 left. So that's 79. If I had a 30% increase in the revenue, that 79 would turn into what? 188. Okay? So that's kind of interesting because this tells me, if things get better, what's the maximum out here I could have for rent and my own labor? Now, what happens if things go down 30%? I could pay $40 to cover my direct, and I would be $30 short of covering all of my overhead costs. And how much was my overhead? 70. Okay, so that means I'm 30 short, so I've got $40, but I'm still 30 short, and you know, that's not going to work. This is a really quick example, but I want to get through all three of them with you just to kind of give you an idea. This is done by crop. How much is available from spring wheat to pay for rent? 50 bushels at $6 right here in the middle. $39. So hard red spring wheat can pay $39 cash rent. That's it. If you pay 40, a buck has to come out of something else. Now how much am I making if you pay 39 in rent? Nothing, because I didn't put anything in for operator labor. How about if I get 42 bushel wheat, and wheat is 510, how much is available for rent? 45 negative. Nothing. With each crop, you get 25 rent scenarios that you can look at instantly. Okay, and I know we don't rent by the crop, but as you do your crop mix and you decide how many acres of this versus how much of this do I want, you start to look at wheat can pay 39. How much can soybeans pay? 91. Oh, okay, soybeans could carry the load for something else, can't they? Because there's $91 available from soybeans to pay on the rent and my labor. How much can I get out of corn? 350 corn at 130 bushel. Corn can help pay $61 rent. Okay, there's some money there. And let's go down to barley. Down here in the barley section, barley could pay how much? $127 available from barley. If I had the option in here to mix and choose some crops, I would probably be looking at more barley and less wheat, more soybeans, you know, some of the obvious choices. But what happens if barley yield goes down to 52 bushel and the price goes to 6.5? I still have $93 available. So again, you've got 5 price levels here, and you've got 5 production levels. So you can pick and choose what's available to pay the rent and to pay me as the operator right here. And again, I think this is a good one if you have an open-minded landlord to lay it in front of them and discuss it with them. You know, to look at these numbers and, you know, at some point they turn negative or they're zeros. Okay? Now there are going to be landlords that are going to say, well, if you don't want it, somebody else will take it for the same. And that may be the case. If you look at all these crops together, we have $79 an acre generated for rent and labor. If the revenue, if all the yields change by 15% and the revenue price changes by 15, we have 197 available. So I could pay the landlord 100 and I make 97 for myself on that particular mix. Now, as you go in here and you change the acres, I've got this set up at 250 acres of each. If I change this to 50 acres of corn, 500 beans, 300 barley, and the rest in wheat, these numbers down here will change. Okay? These up here aren't going to change, but this mix down here is going to change. And it's going to tell you what your overall rent possibility is. So for a program that, you know, this is free of charge, you just go on, like I said, there's nothing, you don't have to buy anything or whatever, you don't even download this. You save these to your computer, and you can save them as do a save as, and save them as a PDF file. And then you have that page in your computer, and you can pull it up and print it. Unless you have a PFF writer, you can't change that again. But you can pull these up anytime, and you can work with them, print them, take them to a landlord, whatever you want to do. Go back to the plans here. Let's say that I want to send this to my lender. All I do is hit share, and I type in his email address, and he gets a copy of it right now. Or you want to send it to a landlord in Arizona that you're working on the phone with, and they don't quite understand what you're talking about, different rents on different crops. Okay, here you can send this to them, and they can get it, pick it up, look at it. Okay, this is just a plain old share rent, but it's another good example to take a look at how it's put together. It's basically the same thing when you set it up and you select share rent. It just asks you what percent does the operator get. And I put in 70. I did a 70-30. And then we went ahead and calculated it. And if the operator is going to pay part of the seed fertilizer, or the landlord is going to pay part of the seed fertilizer or chemical, that same screen, you can do that. You can say the landlord pays 50% of the fertilizer, 50% of the chemical, and it'll take that budget we put in and charge you for half the fertilizer then. On a share crop, we have hard wheat, and we have a 35 bushel yield. Why a 35 bushel yield? 70% of 50. So the math is already done here. Here's our prices. Okay, when we get down here, operators net profit minus 46.40 on wheat. We're renting on a 70-30 basis. So for every acre of wheat, I lose $46. I lose $2 an acre on beans. I lose $60 an acre, $68 on corn, and I make $19 on barley. So what's the average profit on all these crops? $24.43. So there's a quick way to do a rent. What's the landlord get out of this? He gets $109.16 an acre. You know, if somebody said you want to go 70-30 or $90 next year, I think most of us would jump at 70-30. But we'd be paying on this one $109. And the landlord gets $103.61 net because he has to pay our $5.55 of the crop insurance, assuming he's going to insure his part of the crop.
On your clients that do sharecropping, what is the average percent that the landlord gets?
I hate to say it, but there's a lot of 1/3, 2/3 yet, and a lot of 70-30. And even 70-30 doesn't work for the operator in this climate. It did 2 years ago. Everybody made money. Even your wives made money, right? Everybody made money. The spouses got paid. Okay, nowadays the 70-30s are tough. Because as you can see here, we've got pretty normal prices and yields. Now this is the same budget we have been looking at for the last hour. And under this arrangement, we're losing $24 an acre. So that means the landlord couldn't be paid more than what? 109 minus 24. So, you know, in the cash rent, that's all we could pay him.
How much did that change if you dropped it down to say 22?
22%?
Can you do that quick? Probably can.
I can do it, I don't know how quick. Average net profit, $4.69. So you get $5 an acre for your labor.
And what's the landlord get?
Landlord's getting $80.05.
Is there something wrong with that scenario?
I think so.
I think so too.
Can you put 105% in?
It's interesting how many of these numbers, you know, we didn't plan this with this other one. I did this one, I've been using 80 for the last year. But how many of these come back to somewhere around $80 an acre? And that's kind of like, that shuts it off for everybody. But 80 doesn't seem to have the impact out there that you would think it does. Okay? If you flip this, or go down to the bottom there, it tells you the operator's net return versus cash rent. But that's one nice thing about this program, is you can toss all these different numbers at it and take a look at it. Net profit at varying yields, being this is a share crop, it doesn't talk about the value of the rent, because that's determined already. You gave up 30% of the crop. So what am I paying? How much am I going to have available for rent here? I've got available for rent negative $46. So hardwood spring wheat, when I give up 30% of the yield for rent, is $46 short of giving me any money for myself. Okay? How about soybeans? $2 short. Okay? $2 short on soybeans. Soybeans netted me an operator's net profit of -2, so we're $2 short. Corn, I'm a -$69 short of any profit. And as you can see on the bottom, barley makes $19. Again, if you go down to the bottom and look at the total changes, right here, change in yield. If we have a 15% increase in yield and prices stay the same, I would have $14 for my efforts. I would make $14 an acre for operator, labor, and management. And the landlord's taking 30, I'm getting 70, but I need a what? A 15% increase in yield at the old price. Or if I increase the prices by 15%, I also come out at $14. How about if I drop 15% in price and yield? My crop insurance will start to kick in there pretty quick. But at 15 and 15, I'm $95 short of having any money. So I'm doing this, and I'm paying $95 an acre to do this, if prices decline and yield decline by 15%. That's a pretty healthy premium If just the prices decline by 15% and yield stays the same, I'm $63 short. The yield I can have some control over, given the normal production year. But the pricing is pretty much out of my hands a lot of the time. I'll be given some opportunities, and I have to take advantage of them perhaps. But, you know, if the prices drop 15%, I'm still doing this for $63 out of my own pocket. So I get nothing out of this except I get my $70 overheads, okay, which is about $30 to $40 to make my machinery payments and so forth under depreciation. And when times are tough, that's where your depreciation money goes. Okay, it goes into machinery payments. It goes into family living and those types of things. Okay, this is flex rent on percent of gross. Okay, and on the screen you can see how easy it is to set up. I picked out flex rent. Did my same 1,000 acres. I have all my same inputs. I didn't change anything. I set a minimum rent of $50. The landlord said, I'll flex with you, but I want a minimum of $50. I don't want anything less. I don't want to be embarrassed. Okay? Maximum rent. We negotiated that we would not have to pay over $100. What if I get 140 bushel corn and it jumps to $6? Landlord will still get $100 max. So there's a maximum. So we've got a support level at 50, and we've got a ceiling at 100. And let's take a look at this one. Okay, by crop, how much is remaining for rent? First crop, $38. Then we go to soybeans, we've got $90 left. 61 on the corn and 126.75 on the barley. You've seen all those numbers before, because it's just like a hybrid of one of the earlier ones. The break-even rent is $79.18. The rental rate becomes $87.53. And it asks you, when you do this one, what are you assuming is the landlord's percent of the gross? Because there's a sheet in the back that works out a landlord printout also. So, I put in 25%. I pulled back from that 30% in the other one. Let's take a look at the rentals. On the top, second page, you'll notice the minimum rent is 50 again, maximum is 100. Okay, what can hard wheat pay? Yield per acre, 50 bushel wheat at $6 can pay $75. And again, I'm not getting anything for doing this. So if I wanted 20 out of there, it's 55. But I don't want to put my 20 in there because that'll be the first thing the landlord will want to discuss is how much I'm drawing. Okay, so I get to pay 75. Soybeans could pay 81. Corn could pay 100. Barley could pay 94. Okay, under that scenario. And again, this looks like a complicated printout the first time you see it, but don't let that confuse you. It just takes a little time to sit and look at it, and it does sink in. Okay? Hybrid spring wheat. Operator's net profit. Okay, if we go with this deal, I get my $50 minimum and my $100 maximum, and I'm assuming the landlord's going to get a fourth of the crop. This gives me what? $37 negative net return on wheat. A soybean, I get $9 to work with. And that's the 90-50 soybeans generated minus the 81 that the landlord's value of the soybeans is worth. That's how that number is derived. Well, remember, we had $90 worth of soybeans, and the landlord's rent was calculated to be 81, so out of that comes $9 left, and that's what this is. Corn, I get down to a minus $39. That was $100 minus 61. Barley, there is $33 left. Barley generated $126.75, but the landlord gets 25% of the crop, up to $100, or $93.75, and $126 from the front page minus the $93 on this leaves me $33 here. So by crop, it shows you what each crop is going to give back to you. So if you're going to put, make a selection here, I don't want a lot of minus 39s, I want more 33s. I'll take some 9s, and I got a minus 37 up on wheat, so I'm not crazy about wheat either. It's intended for the landlord, or intended, I guess, to give you an idea of what the landlord will be looking at. It's a little bit different. I'll try and explain it the best I can. The landlord gets 25% of the crop. In order to get to about $400 an acre then, the computer looks at different yields and prices, and the closest you can come to 400 is to take 57.5 bushel wheat times 690 price, and you get $397. The landlord would get 25% of that. The flex rent minimum is $50 or $12,500 times the 4 units. The minimum rent that he's going to get out of this is $50,000. Or if we come back here and if you added all of these columns up, using a $100 maximum here, he would get just under $93,000 out of this scenario. Okay, it doesn't give you that. I just went through and calculated that. Adding up, this is the actual revenue. Take 25% of this, and I cut the corn off at 400 because he gets, there's a cut on. If you take 25% of all of these, including corn at 400, you'll get $92,625. So this arrangement looked pretty good, but the landlord ends up with $92,000 instead of $50,000, and I end up with a fairly minimal amount on there. Minus $8.34 an acre. Doesn't work. I'd have to take that $100 maximum and move it down probably to about 90 to affect any crops over 400. Show you one other screen here. Right here. This is where that $100 kicks in. This is on page 2 or 3? Page 2. When you look at each crop, you can tell where the rent leaves off, where you hit the $100 maximum right here. You notice you don't hit $100 maximum very often up here under wheat. Corn does hit $100 maximum because that's gross income, not net profit. Barley, we start to get the hundreds over here. But you can see where the $100 gets, the computer plugs in the 100 instead of a number higher because we set the maximum at $100. So if it calculated to be 130, the computer plugs in 100 because that's the maximum rent. So this does a nice job of putting different crops together, showing you what those crops do independently and then what they do as a group. And then you take this and you'd say, well, let's try 50-80. Well, a 50-80, what kind of money will that give me? And you run this again, and you may find out that $8 negative turns into $12 or $15 positive. That would be your profit per acre. That would be what you pay yourself for doing. Because all of your costs, including overhead, are in here. Okay, that looks like we're running out of time. Any questions? That's a quick one. This one takes the most time to sit and absorb. But this flex rent is well worth looking at. Tom?
What's the 25%? How do you come up with that?
I never found a good answer to that. It's just when you set it up. If you don't fill that line in, it will not calculate. It just says, okay, what are you assuming the landlord's going to get out of this? And I just said, well, 25, 30, I plugged in 25%. If I would have plugged in 30%, it would have been a lot higher. Because he would be getting, he would make assumptions and the landlord is supposed to get 30% of the gross income up to $100 or whatever the max is. So it's just a number that uses to make some of those calculations. And other than that, there's no other explanation for that number.
Could you just use your history and just see about what your landlords have been getting in the past?
You could. Yeah.
It sounds like just a number you make up.
Well, it's a number you make up where it's an assumption. How much do you think you're going to give the landlord? And you can do it by crop. You can do it individually by each crop. It doesn't have to be the same number. And I just plugged in 25, and obviously to me that's too much. So I would go back and run this at 20 and see what it looks like. And then you come up with a scenario that you could present to a landlord perhaps, and then see if you can negotiate a workable rent from there. So this is the easy part. You guys would have to do the rest.
Is this getting more popular?
Which?
This fair rate thing?
This just came out here a month or so ago, 2 months ago.
The flex.
The flex rent, we get more questions on it. One of the things we see is older landlords say, I don't quite understand all that. They don't want to mess with it. But if you can work with a landlord and show them, I'll pay you up to 130 or 120 or 100 or whatever if I get the money. That's the key. Because try and figure some way around the $90 and $100 rent when we're only making $10 at 80.